candidates. We do have volunteers that are walking around. Beth is our chief question taker, and so she has 3x5 cards. Please fill them out and send them back to her. We are going to get started right on time. Welcome. My name is Randy Schubring. I am a Rochester resident and resident of Precinct 4-3 here in Rochester, and want to welcome everybody here from Rochester as well as across the CD1 Congressional District. This event is sponsored by the Rochester DFL party units, which are DFL Senate District 26 and Homestead 25. And it's designed to kick off the DFL Precinct Caucus and Convention endorsement process. As you all may know, Minnesota's Precinct Caucuses will be held Tuesday, February 6th at 7 p.m. Here in Rochester, Willow Creek Middle School and Century High School are the two sites for all the DFL caucuses. To find your site, go to either dfl.org or caucusfinder.sos.state.min.us. And we also have information at the back tables about the caucuses as well. Caucus night is the beginning of the process to endorse one of these candidates to carry the DFL endorsement into the August primary and general election. The process is designed to bring these candidates together with you over the course of the next 2.5 months. Each precinct will elect delegates to Senate District and County conventions, which would be held on Saturdays throughout the month of March and April. Here in Rochester, that convention will be held March 24th at Mayo High School. In turn, the delegates elected at the Senate District and County conventions will then elect delegates to the CD1 convention, which will be held on Saturday, April 21st in Le Sueur. So there's really a good 2.5 month window to get to know these candidates, and we feel honored to host them here in Rochester. Prior to the February 6th caucuses, there are opportunities to learn what goes on at a caucus at training sessions sponsored by the DFL party and the League of Women Voters, and there are flyers in the back as well that give us the dates and times for those caucus training sessions. So first, the rules and the format for tonight's forum. First, I, as moderator, will give a very short introduction of each candidate. Then, after that, each candidate will be allowed 2 minutes for an opening statement. After that, each candidate will answer questions from you, the audience, from the cards. Audience members will not be verbally asking the questions. Beth and her team will forward the questions up to me as the moderator, and they'll also prioritize the questions. So if we have a lot of questions on one topic, we'll condense them so that we can get to as many topic areas as we can. When you write your questions, please address your questions to all the candidates. I said Beth and her team will sort through them. Each candidate will be given 2 minutes to answer each audience question. The order of answering by the candidates will be rotated. So we will start with the opening statements with Vicki. The next round of questions will go to Dan, followed by Joe, followed by Rich, followed by Colin. And we expect to get through 5 to 6 questions from now until 8:35. We do have a timekeeper, Gail Julius, over there. She will indicate time remaining with flashcards for each candidate. At 8:35, each candidate will have 1 minute for a closing statement. The order will be determined after start with the next person that would have answered a question. For those questions that we don't get to, the DFL party will forward them to the campaigns, and they are free to respond to them on their websites or social media accounts. In addition, like I said earlier, I encourage you to seek out these candidates over the next 2 months to learn more about their positions and leadership styles. And one last thing, this event is being broadcast via Facebook Live on the Homestead DFL Facebook page. And Jen over there is our Facebook Live representative. So with that, I will give a short introduction to each candidate. First, we have Vicki Jensen. Vicki is the owner of an insurance agency and lives in Owatonna. She is a family farm advocate, past school board member, and prior Minnesota State Senator. Next to Vicki is Dan Feehan. Dan is a former Deputy Assistant Defense Secretary in the Obama administration. He is a former teacher and captain in the U.S. Army. He lives in North Mankato. Next to Dan is Joe Sullivan. Joe is an attorney and manager of strategic relations for the Center. Is that our sixth candidate there?
Yes,
Bob?
Yeah.
Welcome, Bob. We did not know if you were going to be here.
Yeah, I got delayed a little bit, but I made it.
Okay, well, we are just introducing our candidates. So, Joe Sullivan, attorney. Joe Sullivan is the manager of strategic relations for the Center for Energy and Environment. He lives in Mankato. Next to Joe is Rich Wright, an attorney and former city prosecutor from Rochester. Rich served for 10 years as a judge advocate general in the U.S. Army Reserve. And next to Rich is Colin Meinhardt. Colin was born and raised in Albert Lea and a graduate of the University of Minnesota, a small business owner and small business advocate for over 30 years. And next to Colin is Bob Reese. Bob, you can say one sentence about yourself.
I have an MBA from the University of Chicago. I was a professor at 2 Minnesota universities. I was a commissioned officer in the U.S. Navy, and I've had a lot of business experience, and I taught at 2 universities.
Okay, you will have a 2-minute opening statement, but we just didn't get a bio from you. So with that, this is the first of 2 opportunities for you to join me in one, thanking these candidates for making the commitment to serve and for being here tonight. So join me in a big round of applause. With that, we are underway. Vicki Jensen with her opening statement.
Well, thank you. Good evening. I am the candidate with agriculture in my background, but I've also worked on the factory floor, worked in a cubicle and in an office, and have the keys to my own business, worked the fields of my family farm, been in the boardroom for the school board, and worked on the floor of the Minnesota Senate. Let me tell you, I am asking and running for Congress, but I'm asking for the DFL endorsement, which I will abide by. Let me tell you what I'm for. First, I'm for keeping our promises to our seniors. Let's lower the age to 55 for Medicare. And let's raise the cap on Social Security and keep that program whole. I'm also for making sure that DACA kids, this idea of bait and switch in our policies and power politics has got to end. I'm for empowering people through good, strong public education with loan forgiveness for college students, a healthcare system that actually cares for people more than profits. What I'd like to do is also change the charter system for corporations where they have to make a determination that they will make consideration for their workers, for their citizens and the communities that they support, just as much as they do for their stockholders. We need to build our infrastructure, keep families on farms, but most importantly, I'm for the search for the truth, and I will do that in all areas of policy that I'm looking at, because I think the wall that's being built right now is around our government, and it's keeping us and the truth out. But if we want any of the reforms to happen that we're going to talk about, that I stand for and that we're going to hear about tonight, we are going to have to pass the reform that makes all other reforms possible, and that's campaign finance reform, and get some of that out of our process. Mostly I'm for our democracy, because I believe in a democracy that's of the people, by the people, and for the people, and I really appreciate the opportunity to be here tonight to talk with you. Thank you.
Thank you to our hosts for hosting this event here tonight. Randy, thank you for moderating. And thank you to all of you, most importantly, for being here, for taking the time to participate. Your passion, your advocacy inspires me every day. My name is Dan Feehan, and I am running to be the next congressman here in the 1st District. I grew up here in southern Minnesota, and that's where I learned the value that all of us are in this together, that we all do our part, and that we all accomplish things when we work together. And that's how I've lived my life. As soldiers in Iraq, we worked together to find roadside bombs and capture insurgents. As teachers in Gary, Indiana, we worked together to make sure our kids in low-income communities could have a great education. And as leaders in the Pentagon, we worked together to make sure our service members were ready for battle and ready for life after service. And now I am running to make sure that we here are well served in Congress. Because this campaign is not about me, it's about us. It's about our challenges and putting them first, our aspirations first, to fight for our values and for our future. Because as Democrats, there's so much more that unites us than divides us. And it's important to remember that here today. The stakes are high for our communities, for our district, for our state, and for our country. And when our democracy is so fragile, it's important to have leaders who identify challenges and offer solutions. Talk about what we are for, not just what we're against. So what am I for? I am for universal health care. I am for an education system that won't saddle our students with crippling debt. I am for a sound and safe nation that embraces our neighbors for who they are and where they come from. I am for fighting climate change so that we can pass this earth on to our kids. And I am for a fair economy and tax system that works for all of us and promotes growth for our family farm. Now look, I'm looking forward to discussing every one of these issues and more here tonight and talking about how we together can pave a new path forward for southern Minnesota. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Joe Sullivan, and I am an attorney and a clean energy advocate. I live in Mankato with my wife, Kara, who is a pediatrician, and my 2 daughters, Rose and Vera. I've spent my career working with municipal governments like the city of Rochester and Mankato, Laverne, Albert Lee, Austin. I've spent a lot of my career working in clean energy, working on supporting the more than 6,000 jobs in the 1st District in wind and solar and energy efficiency. I'm tremendously proud of the work that I've done for cities, working with them to make sure that police and fire and wastewater treatment facilities and transportation and roads have the resources that they need so that they can compete. And I'll tell you, as I've been in this race now for 6 months, and I've crisscrossed this district. I'm driving 1,000 to 1,500 miles a week. And it has been the honor of my life. But what I will tell you is that the fundamental issue in this race, the biggest issue in this race, is that despite living in a district that has tremendous prosperity, we have the Mayo Clinic, we're a top 5 producer of corn and beans, we have 10% of the pork consumed in this country comes from the 1st District. Top 10 district in wind energy. 10% of Minnesota's energy comes from wind farms in our district. Despite all of this prosperity, it is not a shared prosperity. And all you need to do is you go to a small community, pick one, and you go to the downtown that's tired, you see a sign to a store that hasn't existed for 10 years, a hardware store or a cafe that's been closed for 5 years. You look at, if you could go underground, you'd see old pipes that were built in the 30s. A wastewater treatment facility that was last built, was built during the New Deal and it can't meet the needs of that community today. And that is our challenge. That is our challenge. This is not a shared prosperity. What we need to do to make this a shared prosperity is make sure that healthcare, everybody has healthcare because it's a right. To make sure that everybody...
Thank you.
Okay.
Rich, right.
You want us just to keep these on the same line?
There's another one right next to you, Rich.
Is it live? Can you guys hear me okay? Okay, great. Good evening. Thank you to all of you for braving the icy roads to be here tonight. And thanks to the DFL 25 and 26 and to the library for providing the forum. I always love coming to the library because it always brings back fond memories of bringing my children here. I have girls when they were little. 2018 is going to be the most important election of our lifetime. No matter your age, race, class, gender, or creed, this election is going to shape our future and the future of our children and our grandchildren. It is critical, absolutely critical, that Democrats hold the seat in CD1. And I know that I'm the best candidate to do that. I was born and raised right here in southern Minnesota. My 4 siblings and I went to school here in Rochester. My wife and I are proud to raise our children here. I spent 10 years in the U.S. Army Reserve as a military lawyer, and I served our community for 5 years as a prosecutor. I know how to negotiate tough deals, and I know how to win. Over the course of the campaign, I've traveled throughout the district, and speaking with folks about issues, and one issue has come up time and time again. It's the healthcare issue. When I was in law school, we helped people who were being denied health insurance because of pre-existing conditions get the insurance they need. Right now, our farmers are having to shell out $30,000 to $40,000 before insurance companies pay a dime. This is not sustainable. We need to do something to change it. And when I was being raised here, healthcare is a fundamental human right. We need to move quickly, right now, to a single-payer system. There are a lot of other issues facing us. Affordable housing, paid family leave, a living wage, investment in our public schools, climate change, and more. And I look forward to talking with you about those tonight. My name is Rich Wright. I'm asking for your support to be your next congressperson. Thank you.
Yep. Is it working okay? Wonderful. I'm going to stand up because I see people in the back kind of craning to look to see what's going on up here. My name is Colin Meinhardt. I live just down the street, down Interstate 90 in Albert Lea. Born and raised there. Been a small business owner there for 30 plus years. This is a job that I've been training for over 40 years. As a small business owner and a small business advocate, I know who the customer is. And the customer is you. You are the ones that are concerned about this election. We're not so much concerned about all the international issues and everything going on, but what about this district? This district is dominated by agriculture. Farmers up and down, not only grain farmers, animal farmers, fruit farmers. That's what drives this district. I'm also glad to be in Rochester today and not be up the street there at the Mayo Hospital where they did wonderful things for me. I got nothing but good things to say about Mayo, except we are having a little problem with them in Albert Lea. So that elephant in the room, that's still walking around. So that's still an issue we deal with. But 3 things that I want to point out here. Just as they've talked about up and down the district health care. Is it affordable? Is it accessible? Will we be able to use it? Can our children, I have 2 children, 28 and 32, will they be able to buy a home, have health care, raise a family? They're concerned about that. My parents are in their mid-80s. They're looking at assisted living. How are we going to take care of our seniors so that they can retire with dignity, with safety and security? I'm here to work for you. I will be back in this district every single week. Listening to you. I will be the easiest guy for you to get a hold of. 3 things I want to work on. Healthcare, agriculture, constituent services. I'm going to be here for you. Thank you.
You can go next and hold the mic like this to your mouth. It's a directional mic, so it picks up
Like this?
Exactly.
I'm running because our country is under attack, plain and simple. The country I knew and loved growing up in Winona, it's under attack. It's being diminished every day by this president and his Republican cohorts. Every day. Now, I was raised in Winona. I graduated from high school and college there. I went on to get my MBA at the University of Chicago, the foremost economics teaching institution in the world. And I later taught economics at the college level. I taught at Winona State, and I taught at Southwest State, which is farm country. I know the issues facing rural America. One of the foremost issues is health care, as you've heard. this administration and these Republicans want to cut, they passed to cut Medicaid and give money to the rich. Medicaid will decimate nursing homes, rural hospitals. Now, I have actually put forth a plan. In all the other meetings, I never heard of another candidate who put forth a plan to save Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. I'm the only one, and you look at my platform, I'm the only one that talked about closing tax loopholes. We have a government of the rich, by the rich, for the rich. I want to change that. Now, if you look at my background, and I was a commissioned officer in the military, so I understand that too. I was a small business owner. I think I'm admirably prepared to represent you in Congress. And I'm the only one who has come out to end the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. Why keep burning money
Bob.
and sacrificing veterans?
Thank you. On to our questions. And Bob, if you could pass that mic up to Dan. Dan is going to be the first to answer this question, and then I'll send this one back to the table. According to the Cook Report, Minnesota's 1st Congressional District is one of 3 open seats that Democrats are defending in Republican-leaning districts. In 2016, we all know Congressman Walz barely squeaked out a win, with Donald Trump winning CD1 by 15 points. With the Republican Congressional Campaign Committee and other right-wing leaning political action committees targeting this race and bringing expected millions in campaign dollars and political advertising, what is your plan for us to win this seat?
It's a great question. Thank you to whoever asked that here today. It's on a lot of people's minds. Look, for me, this strategy is all about what I talked about here at the beginning. And that's the idea that we're all in this together and that we're all doing our part. That is what I learned here growing up in Red Wing. That is what the district, Southern Minnesota, still is here today. I think a lot about the city of Hanska. Hanska City in Brown County, where, again, everyone does their part. Where 10% of the community of volunteer firefighters, where Darlene has been in the Army, has been a nurse, but despite that retirement, is still doing her part for her community. And she's doing that in spite of the world that we're living in today that feels so divided, where it seems like people can't even agree on basic facts, where I'm sure you guys have watched Facebook and Twitter fights galore for the last 2 years now. This campaign is about realizing just how much we have in common. And at the end of the day, public service is the idea that in spite of any disagreements we might have, we're going to do this together. And the strategy of this campaign is to get everyone out. Like they stayed home in 2016, no, everyone will be out to talk about what we are for. It's not to talk negatively in another way. That's going to take care of itself. But what are we for? How are we going to solve the anxieties that we're experiencing today? How are we going to remind us that the work of Congress is public service? And we're doing that through a great grassroots campaign that we've got supporters in every corner of this district, just like Tim Walz, because that's what won in 2006, that's what will win here today. And you have to have resources. Representative here, Carla Nelson, just raised $218,000 in the last 3 months. It will take resources to win this district, and my campaign is proud of the resources that we've brought to the fight so far, and that we are going to continue to bring to this fight. And that is hard work, as all the candidates will talk about, how hard it is to raise money. But again, it is about people standing up and everyone doing your part for this campaign in the same way that we do our part for each other. Thank you.
So a couple things. Yes, this district did go for Trump in 2016, but the district also went for Tim Walz in 2016. Here's my view. And I think Dan is right. There are resources that are going to be needed. But we also, the way we win this race is we need a candidate with the right message. And the right message is we talk about the issues that matter, the issues that are real. And how do we do that? What are the big issues? Well, you know, the big issues are a lot of our communities, they can't compete. Not because they're not good people there, not because the people don't have an education. It's because they got a water system that's 80 years old. the first question that any company asks when coming to a community is, how old is your water system? Do you have the capacity in your water system? And if the answer is, well, we got to go to the Public Facilities Authority to get a $40 million grant, well, then they go on to the next community. So what we need to do is we need to talk to the issues that matter. And those are, we need to address the fact that, you know, our communities are being hollowed out because kids can't move home back, or they can't move back home. They've got, you know, $20,000, $30,000, $50,000 in debt. So if we're addressing the issues like education, making sure that you can move home, if we're addressing infrastructure so that we're setting up for the next generation, for the next 100 years of growth, if we are addressing healthcare so that we are dealing with that farmer who is paying $30,000 a year and has a $5,000 deductible and is functionally uninsured, if we are addressing those issues and we make sure that they know that it is our party and not the other party that's going to do it, that's how we win.
You know, there's more that we have in common than what divides us. This comes true, unfortunately, in that healthcare issue that I raised at the opening. I've got clients who are Republican, Democrat, Independent, and guess what? The healthcare issue doesn't matter. But it doesn't care if you're Republican, Independent, or Democrat. Either way, you're still shelling out $35,000, $40,000 before insurance pays a dime. Either way, we have families across this district who are having to make that unconscionable choice between food or medication. These issues, that's just an example. We have infrastructure issues throughout the district. This is hitting us no matter what the party affiliation is. So people are actually looking for A, do you understand us? B, do you understand the issues? And C, do you have solutions that are viable? And if we do that, and my campaign is, we'll win. We've actually looked at this particular issue, and we've learned that if all we need is a 1% win share, and we guarantee the race, not only for the CD1, but also for the governor's seat. That's how tight this race is, and all we need is 1% more. And we've run the numbers on this in multiple different ways. So all we need is that 1%, and we can do that. And we do that by speaking to the issues to make sure that we're addressing the issues that are important to our constituents. You know, the other thing is, there's a lot of grassroots movement out there. Aren't you guys feeling that? We've had marches. We've marched together on a whole slew of different issues, from women's issues to, we had a march for science. There is so much momentum. We need to make sure we're listening to people who are active and engaged and draw on their support, and we'll win it.
Nice job. Everybody's doing a great job. CD1 was an interesting district. This has been discussed. As a small business owner, I happen to own a bar restaurant. So you can imagine the conversations that go on in there. As we bring this along, to bring this to fruition, when you looked at the last race, you had all kinds of people that came out and voted for Trump that never voted before. So I think you had an artificial push up there. Tim Walz still stood strong. Tim Walz won that race. Hagedorn did not come close to beating Walz. Maybe that number was there, but if they would have come out just like they came out for Trump, Walz would have got buried. But that didn't happen because Tim sends the message. He understands, as I do, the Southern Minnesota way of life. And I'll tell you one thing that is true throughout this district, from Winona all the way over to the South Dakota border, people care about each other. And we listen to each other, and we respect each other. And we want to work for the good of all. It isn't about just one individual. We just had a big tax break come. As I'm listening to the owner of Cambria, a medium-sized business, says it's going to cost him 3%. So a lot of these so-called tax breaks are going to work against a lot of our businesses. We have to point out these corrections. We have to work at the Minnesota legislature to correct some things that the federal government did. But most of all, I just have to listen to you. and bring your concerns forward. Because this isn't about the DFL, and it isn't about the Republicans. It's about you folks. And I'll say this right here, right now. This district is not for sale. This district is for these people. It's for you. It isn't all this outside and dark money going to flow in here, because they're not going to tell Southern Minnesota who to elect. You are.
The way I will win is to appeal to values and to help better explain what is really happening. We are a rural district. This plan to cut Medicaid will devastate our whole district. Everybody. I have put forth a plan of how to save it. Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. And the other aspect, I've talked here about universal health care. If we don't have our health, what do we have? You can count all the jobs in the world, but I can't take them if I can't work. Now, the other thing is fairness. I have put that down here as my motto. Why is it a few years ago, ExxonMobil and General Electric paid absolutely no tax? Why is it that realtors have this special law that allows them to depreciate their business in 1 year, a new business? Do you think that's why Donald Trump won't reveal his taxes? I sure do. And so I'm for fairness, and those are the things I will hit on. Who pays the taxes? Who gets the breaks? Why have a government of the rich, by the rich, for the rich? Let's have a government of the people, by the people, for the people. Now, I've taught a number of business subjects at the college level, including economics. I can explain all the negatives of what the Republicans are doing. That's how you win. You clarify issues. You appeal to common values. You appeal to our future. And that's what I would do, and I will be heard.
We need to show up, we need to speak up, and we need to listen. When I ran for the Senate and won in a tough district, first one to win, first DFLer to win in over 40 years, and the first woman to hold that seat. I had conversations all over my Senate district, and had a real conversation with people at their door. I also chaired Steele County DFL. And I know what it's like to try to get people to come, and whether they're a candidate or whether they're a sitting or legislator, an official, and how much work it takes to try to get them in front of people so that they can get their concerns heard. When I was elected, I held second Saturday with your senator event, the second Saturday of every single month. And the reason that I did that is because I wanted to stay grounded to the people that had chosen me as one of them to represent them. And I wanted to make sure that I was hearing what they had to say. But let's be realistic about this. If we're going to win this district, we need a candidate that can sit down and talk with people about what's happening in a language that they understand, because they're not learning it. I've lived it. I've experienced it. And we need someone with that rural, working class experience to go out to Washington. It was so important when I was in the Senate. Things would come up all the time that we would have to talk to. And with that experience and that knowledge and that really, really hard work, we were able to do things. Minnesota United taught me a really good lesson. Talk to your neighbors, talk to your family about your story. Talk to your friends. Talk then to people that you don't know. We need to, as a district, come together and unite over issues, not just individual silo policies. Let's get together on some of these issues, and that's what I'm working on. That's what I'm going to do. That's what I did in the Senate, on the school board, and all the way through. And that's what this campaign is about, bringing people together and listening, and then getting to work to make sure we hold this seat and send someone out to Washington who has proven they will work hard on those issues.
Thank you. Great, we're moving through these questions very well. So I think Joe takes this one next. In recent news, we've had 2 more school shootings as well as a fatal shooting right here in our city. At this moment, a family is grieving the loss of their 17-year-old son. Everyone here should be outraged. What do you feel is needed to prevent mass shootings, reduce overall gun violence, and improve the safety of the public in our communities?
This is one of those questions that I think a lot about, and you know, I think about gun violence, and I feel terrible for the people who have suffered, and I know that it's something that could happen to anybody. Here's the way I feel about guns. People have a right to own a gun in this country, but I think that as far as guns are concerned, we need to do the following things. You know, we need to make sure, we need to regulate guns. We need to make sure that that people are not able to convert a gun into a machine gun, a weapon of mass, you know, killing, like they did in Las Vegas. I look at gun violence in the same way that in the 60s and the 70s they looked at automobiles and they said, you know, 50,000 people a year die in an automobile accident. Let's study the problem. Let's require cars to have analog brakes and airbags and crumple zones and make sure that automobiles are safer. And what's happened is that vehicle deaths on the highway have gone down. We need to study gun violence in the same way. We need to allow the National Institutes of Health to study it. We need to repeal that law and allow guns to be safe. On top of that, we need to make sure that guns are safer. And those are things like making sure that, you know, you can't have a 50 bullet magazine, and you make sure that that guns are potentially keyed to people so that, you know, it's a smart gun. There are things that we can do to make guns safer so that they cannot be used in the way that they are used today. And that's what we need to do. We need to regulate guns in that way. Thank you.
So when I was in the military, I was a sharpshooter on the M16 as well as the 9mm. I know how these weapons work. I'm good with them. And the M16 is a great weapon for the military. It does not belong on our streets, nor does any assault. Furthermore, we need to make sure that any time a gun is being transferred from one person to another person, a background check is done. This should be universal. So if I'm going to give a weapon to Colin, we should be able to get online to make sure that we can get a background check done. So we can avoid these backdoor deals that are happening at the gun shows. If you can't fly, you shouldn't be owning a gun, right? These are common sense. It's common sense solutions. But you know what? The real problem is we're viewing this issue wrong. This is a public health crisis. We have to allow the CDC and the NIH to start to actually do the studies on this so we can actually figure out what we need to do to make ourselves safer. Because we don't know, right? We don't have the studies done. So let's unshackle the CDC, the NIH, give them the funds to do this, and let's figure out what's going to be good policy. In the interim, we do the other things I talked about. And of course, the one thing I forgot to say is we need to limit some of these accessories like bump stocks. We just don't need them. And if we can limit some of those in the interim, then I think we'll all be better off. Because I don't know about you, but I am sick and tired of waking up and hearing about another gun death, a shooting at a school, a mass shooting in public, or what we had experienced in our own community just the other day. So let's do something about it.
This is a real huge issue, and it's a tough issue. It's an issue that has different facets to it as we talk about guns, because we just can't throw all guns, just don't go into one category. Because we have a lot of people that hunt in Minnesota and fish in Minnesota and enjoy responsible use of these weapons. I'm not going to make it any secret. I am a conceal and carry holder. I do have a permit. I've had one for about 7 years now. Do I carry my weapon? No. but it's there if I want to, because that is what's guaranteed in my constitutional rights, and I will always defend those constitutional rights. But I am not so bold and brazen with weapons that think they should be everywhere. No, we shouldn't have automatic weapons. No, we don't need 30 clip magazines. No, we don't need bump stocks. The NRA has to come to grips that this just isn't free for all, just to let these guns out here. These guys make some good points of tracking this stuff to make sure that they don't end up in the hands of felons and other criminals that want to use them against us. But we also have to recognize that this horse has left the barn. There are so many millions and millions of weapons in this country, but you know what? We can still keep that horse in the pasture. And that's what I think that we need to come together and to figure this thing out. It isn't about walking around with a hammer and saying this is what we're going to do. It's about bringing groups of people together to have a common sense solution so the sportsmen can do their sport and the criminals can be dealt with in our justice system. Thank you.
As you have heard, there is a consensus here. How do we regulate guns? Which guns do we allow? Why can people buy an AK-47? Why can they? And so we need background checks. We need to limit who can have a gun. When somebody's been convicted of a crime, they shouldn't be allowed to have a gun anymore. How about the mentally disabled and disturbed? There are a lot of rational things. What we have to admit is we're still going to have gun crime. And here's where we need to take another step. That's with our educational system. We need to start teaching better. Violence is not the answer. We're all citizens. We all should respect each other. We all should commit to solving our problems peacefully, with intelligence. And so, you know, changing all this is not going to happen overnight. We have a violent history. I know that because I lived in London for 2 years, and I can tell you the British have a whole different perspective. And we aren't going to change that overnight. That Wild West syndrome still resides. If you don't believe me, go to Texas.
Well, this issue brings a lot of emotion. People are very passionate, especially if they've had an experience personally. When I think about guns for myself personally, I think about fond memories I have going pheasant hunting in South Dakota with my family and going to my grandma and grandpa's house. And we did that so often. And we had to be a dog for 5 years before we could shoot. But yeah, we chased them and did everything. But my grandfather, as he aged, he would be the blocker at the end of the field. I'm telling you, some people should not have guns. He would shoot into the field as we're walking. You could hear the BBs, you'd take the dead. Okay, some people should not have guns. I understand that. When I went to the Senate, I carried a piece of legislation that required, if you were convicted of 5th-degree strangulation in a domestic violence situation, you couldn't own a handgun. I have that in my background. I'm willing to do that work. So we do have to have common sense. Gun legislation, most people agree that we need to close loopholes with gun shows and we need to have background checks and some of those things. But the reason we can't get it is why I'm running. And the reason that I talked about this campaign finance reform. Because if people, an NRA wanted to help us do this and reduce gun violence, they would. And if legislators wanted to reduce gun violence without that impact, they would. So let's remove that leverage. Let's remove that leverage out of our hands. So we can pass out in Washington common sense gun legislation that makes sense.
I'm really glad this question got asked here tonight. In my view, there is no better time to talk about gun violence than in the wake of gun violence. And the city of Rochester knows that well this week, where a young man was taken far ahead of his time, just reaching his potential in life. And there is no better time to talk about gun violence than what happened yesterday in Kentucky. Anyone even noticed? Did it even make the news? 20 high school students were killed or were shot in Kentucky. The 11th mass shooting of 2018. Anyone know that? There's been 24 days in 2018, the 11th mass shooting in our country. There is no better time to talk about this issue and keep talking about this issue and talk about it when you have credibility. And I've got credibility to talk about it. Guns have impacted my life in more ways than I usually care to talk about. I've been on the receiving end of automatic gunfire. It's the worst feeling you can have. You can't move, you can't think. I've carried a weapon of war into war and viewed that I would put it back down after that. But the kids I taught in Gary, guns impacted them too, and I've lost students to gun violence. Men I've served with, I've lost to gun violence, and the 10,000 lives taken every year through suicide by gun. And when I think about the women, mostly women lost through domestic violence and guns, this is portraying a picture not just of a public health crisis, but of an issue that is far more wide-reaching than we care to talk about. It impacts many people, not just someone somewhere else, not someone who is poor, not someone who is brown, not someone who is down on their luck, not someone who is in a mental state. It impacts all of us. And it's time to talk about it that way. And to keep that conversation going to a place that we identify as a public health crisis, that we research it, to find good policy that can reduce gun violence and put guns in the hands of people that should have them in the first place, I'm going to be leading on that conversation in Congress. And if organizations like the NRA do not want to be a part of it, fine, we will move on without them. Woo!
Our next question, I believe, goes to Rich to start. With a new NAFTA agreement being negotiated by President Trump, what would you like to see in it to protect American workers and farmers?
Right now, with NAFTA, what we need to do is, with the trade with Mexico and Canada in particular, we need to expand for our farmers, especially for the egg sections. Mexico, but the problem we're facing with NAFTA is our president, right? Because what's happening is we have a deal already with NAFTA with Mexico for good trade pricing for our crops, but because our president disparages the country of Mexico and the leadership of Mexico, Mexico is now buying its product from Brazil and Argentina. So this is a lot more complex. You know, we have a better shot at getting a better deal with Canada because we need Canada to do some adjustments on milk prices. But they have no incentive right now to do that. So we need leadership in Washington that's willing to work with Canada to help so our dairy farmers can get better pricing. And same with Mexico. Because we have a lot of damage control to do in order to make trade work. Because the trade only works if you're friends, right? If you're not going to be friendly with the other country, they're not going to deal with you. And that's part of the issue we're facing with NAFTA and our negotiations with NAFTA. So I would work to try to expand the market so that we have a better market for our farmers in order to get our produce off. And that's, when I talk to farmers out throughout the district, that's one of the big issues they have right now, is how do we sell our product? And that's what I would do. Thanks.
Yes, NAFTA is a complex issue, and it closely affects our closest trading partners here with Canada and Mexico. In Canada, they produce a lot of lumber that comes into the United States, and we've had plenty of storms in this country and rebuilding this country. So that's a huge supply that's coming in here from Canada. And Mexico is another huge trading partner. Not to mention that southern Minnesota exports, well, farm exports like 30% of pork is exported. So anytime we start tweaking NAFTA, we start affecting our farmers, and we start affecting us. And you say, well, us, well, we're consumers. We have the farmers out producing products, and we're consumers, and everything we do affects what happens right here at home. If these farmers have the opportunity to sell their products, to earn a profit, they're going to put it back into the communities that we live in. So NAFTA is something that is going to be crafted by, obviously, people that have a higher pay grade than mine. But I'll definitely be going to work on this, making sure that the folks in southern Minnesota are protected and the commodities that we trade in here are protected. Thank you.
Unfortunately, what's happened is we get a lot of talk that, oh, we're being taken advantage of. Every day Trump talks about it in one way or another. What is lost track of is the benefits. Why do you think this trade agreement went into effect? If you study the economy, it's after NAFTA that under the administration of Bill Clinton that we had a budget surplus. Think about that for a minute. I know because I studied economics. I know because I've studied international trade. Now, if we want to correct NAFTA, we have to first take a closer look at what it really does. As many here have pointed out, it greatly benefits our agricultural sector. Why is it that other sectors don't benefit as much? If you study economics, it gets down to efficiency and cost of production, plain and simple. And we are not going to be best at everything. There are over 200 countries in the world. We are not going to be most efficient at everything. The whole benefit of trade, if you look at our country, we first had a confederation of states. The reason we went away from it was the trade. We wanted to get trade amongst all the states. NAFTA is good in principle. What we have to look at is what does it really work out to. Now Trump's taking the totally wrong approach. He says he wants to renegotiate it. In code, it means he wants to change it to better favor the United States. When you negotiate with another country, there has to be give and take. He found that out with the wall, didn't he? That Mexico was going to pay for. Where did that go?
When it comes to trade agreements and the work that we need to do on those, including NAFTA and others that come up, it's important to have someone at the table that has been fighting for these issues for a while. I know we have changed in southern Minnesota the way that our agriculture system looks. From not too long ago, we were diverse farms with some livestock and some crops, and you could make a go of it, and you could make that work. All of a sudden, livestock vertical integration came into effect. I fought against that out in Washington several years ago, and we didn't do very well. So now we have, you've made a choice. Either you do livestock or you do the feed that feeds the livestock. And each one, the commodities get bigger and bigger, and the livestock barns get bigger and bigger. And that's because of our federal policy on what we're doing with agriculture. What trade deals do is they open up enough markets for us to be able to make a living and get what we need on our farms, to be able to stay on our farms, and that's why I became part of Farmers Union and Steele County Farmers Union Secretary Treasurer, because I wanted to be part of that conversation. But I knew at the state level, trying to have those conversations didn't go far enough. If you want to make any changes in this, you need to be out in Washington where those decisions and where that public policy is being made. Long time ago, they decided at the federal level that you got to get big or go home. Remember that? Go big or go home, and that's what's happening. And it has changed the landscape of southern Minnesota. I want to work on these trade agreements because they are so important, not just for on our farms, but our rural communities, for what agriculture brings to it. So I would love to have those conversations. It includes Biodiesel, we send more to Mexico because we don't have to pay so much for the transportation. There's a lot in this, and I'd love to go to work for that.
This question gets asked a lot on the campaign trail because, as you guys all know, farmers are very aware of what's happening in the world. They're deeply aware. They watch what changes. They watch how markets change on a daily in an occupation that has such slim margins in the first place. I learned this early on, the time I spent overseas, that our reputation precedes us as a country. And that reputation is based on who is in the White House and how they behave, how they comport themselves, how they lead in the world. And that has been a hallmark of the United States, that we lead in the world. But just a recent survey last week indicated that we are not leading as much as we used to, and that countries like Germany and China are taking our place. And that's not just about behavior, it's about how everyone else follows that lead. And so the behavior in the White House sets that tone, and that is making people nervous right now. All over this district, all over this country. People that, soy producers, corn producers, also pork producers who watch this, and watch a president and White House take a direction that we as a country are not prepared to do. In Congress, I'm going to take the role that there are two branches of government that do foreign policy, not just one. There is a co-equal branch of government, the Congress, in which I will lead on that, in the same way I learned diplomacy as a young man in Iraq. And that's the idea that we must pursue fair deals, fair trade deals that benefit American workers and benefit our economy. Southern Minnesota impacts the world impacts Southern Minnesota. That is the world we are living in. And if no one is leading on this issue, the world will pass us by. So if the White House is not going to take the step to lead, I will do so in Congress to protect deals like NAFTA and make sure any future trade deals are done so on a fair basis that makes our economy strong.
So, on trade, I start from the proposition that trade at first is a good thing. It expands our ability to get into additional markets. It allows us to do what we do best and allows other people to do what they do best. And in Minnesota, our agricultural economy, as we've talked about, is extremely good at what it does. And there are tens of thousands of jobs in southern Minnesota that are reliant on our trade deals, on NAFTA, on opening up these markets that they can get into. When I was at Farm Fest, I think it's 1 out of every 6 rows of corn in Minnesota is traded internationally. So this is a huge deal for us. But here's what we need to do. We need to make sure that our trade deals reflect our values. They need to, thanks, thanks Carl. They need to reflect our values. It makes no sense for us to get into deals that obliterate our manufacturing base. It makes no sense for us to get into deals that that destroy our communities. I think about, in particular with carbon emissions, you know, we talk about how we've reduced our carbon emissions in this country. Well, we've also sent basically our manufacturing base to China. So their emissions are really our emissions, and it's our trade policy that's allowed that to happen. So what I want to do in Congress, when I'm in Congress, I want to make sure that our trade deals reflect our values. That the deals that we're getting into are going to make sure that the other countries have equal and they have environmental protections that are on par with ours. That they have worker safety protections that are on par with ours. If we can do that, then we'll have good deals. We will open markets. We won't destroy our manufacturing base. We won't destroy our communities. And that's what I'm going to ensure.
I think our next question goes to Colin, and if folks have cards, please find Beth and send them up because we've got some great questions. This next one is my favorite. Today is my birthday. I'm 11 years old. I don't know where she or he is, but what are you going to do about the drug problem in America?
Excellent question. Excellent. It shows you that young people are paying attention, they're watching the news, and they're seeing what's going on out there. And we do have a huge problem in this country. And the problem, obviously, that we're talking about is opioids. Is a major problem that is destroying families, that is destroying communities, not only families. I don't quite understand how this all happens. For 6 years through high school and college, I worked in a pharmacy. I saw some of the legal destruction of people that were taking medications legally. I don't understand how this stuff makes its way into the marketplace. Is it not regulated? You know, who's producing this? These drug companies, and it just comes in the back of pickups? We have to get tough on this stuff. Instead of wasting our time chasing down people, chasing down kids that got a joint and a can of beer. That's not our problem. The problem is this hard drugs in this country, which is the heroin, the methamphetamine, and these opioids, and we have to put the hammer on it. We have to give law enforcement the resources they need to pursue this, and we have to put these people into our justice system. We have to protect our youth. This is our future, folks. It isn't me. I'm not the future of America. That's the future of America right there, and that's what we all have to come together and protect. And we have to make some tough choices, and we're going to have to spend some government money on this thing, but this has to happen today. We can't continue to talk about it. We have to take action on it, and we have to do it now. Thank you.
I'm going to hit you with something controversial. When I lived in Britain, they had legal drugs. Yes, they did. So does Holland. And what they do, anybody that wants it can go and get it from a government dispensary. And then they are immediately put into a drug rehab program. Now I see a hand there, but oh, okay. We should have learned a lesson from alcohol. What did we get by outlawing it? We drove it underground. We corrupted our police. That's what's happening today. You can't tell me, read any article you want where they arrest people for drugs that's in a known drug area. How is that? Let's admit it. Our police forces are corrupted in the big cities. They're probably corrupted right here in Rochester. Don't laugh. This is serious. And so, in my estimation, the way to solve this problem is to legalize it. Put a small tax on it. It'll still be far cheaper than them getting it from the underground. And then use that to build facilities to treat people. We are not going to solve this problem. We've been fighting the drug war for 47 years under Nixon. We are not going to solve it by further criminalizing it, by further cracking down.
Well, I hope that you can feel some comfort that the people here understand the question and have some desire to make some changes in that. Because being anxious about something like that is why people run for office and why they want to make change. And they want to do what they can to make things better, especially for the next generation. So what I would do with this is I would fight really hard. We can try to make sure all of these things happen, but all we can really say is that we will work as hard as we can, and I will work as hard as I can to keep the 10 essential health benefits that includes mental health for parity and for addiction services. And then we have to make sure that we raise up the reimbursement rates that we need in our healthcare system so that our rural healthcare system can make those services available. Because it doesn't make much difference if you've got available, you can't go see a doctor or you can't get those services. When I served in the state legislature, we are holding people with addiction issues in jail. we are holding them in jail and not giving them the treatment and the things that they need. So I would focus on the treatment end, but I know there are things we can do up front with our judiciary system and giving people what they need on that end too. But let's make sure, let's work really hard and be honest and have really good conversations with people of all ages and let them know that we're not giving up on this issue. So if we have the reimbursement rates there, and we know that the mental health services and people can have access to it, that we can make a difference for individual people. But we still have to go after the companies that are putting this onto the market. And that's also why we need campaign finance reform, because we've got to get them, pharmaceuticals and the insurance companies, out of those decisions.
Thanks, and thanks for asking this. That's awesome. There's a lot of people here too scared to ask a question tonight, so way to step up. It's awesome. Look, just like we talked about firearms, drugs impact all of us, and that's the idea of drugs being illegal and legal. And that's the idea that in spite of everything we talked about here today, the one that has the largest healthcare consequences for our country is still alcohol at the end of the day, a drug that's been legal for so long. So yes, when it comes to this is about treating addiction as just that, as addiction, not as crime. It is about decriminalizing nonviolent drug offenses, something that indiscriminately targets people of color and impoverished people in the first place. And is ensuring we are fully funding our social programs that we have that do deliver on these things. And it is about electing Democrats who will actually stand up for this issue in the first place. By Democrats today, this is an important one to remember. The millennial generation is not the future, it is the now of Democratic politics. Millennials are the largest generation in our country. They prefer Democratic control of government at 2-to-1 margin, yet only 34% of millennials intend to vote in this year. I bet you would vote if you could vote this year. This is taking ownership of our issues, and now it's got to be a priority. And Democratic policies will treat drugs in their holistic sense as just that. They are an addiction that we have to deal with, that we are struggling with as a country on a scale far more than any other civilized nation in this world. And the last thing I'd say to you, you got a big 10 years ahead of you. You're going to be left with a lot of choices, tough choices for yourselves. You're going to watch your friends go through tough choices that deal with drugs, and it's hard to face them. You got to have courage, and you got to stand up and lead your friends, because no government's going to solve this problem all on its own. It's you caring for your friends at the end of the day.
I think there are several issues here, and one of them is prescription drugs, and as it's been said before, but there was an article recently that I read about how the prescription drug crisis is actually something that has really developed over the last 20 years, and in particular the last 10 years. And it's because of out-of-control companies that are making massive profits on selling narcotics to people, and it is absolutely unconscionable what they're doing. These are public companies, they make massive amounts of resources, and what we need to do is we need to regulate them. We need to make sure that they're not pumping drugs out into our country and destroying lives. I think the numbers are, prescription drug deaths and overdoses are now one of the leading causes of death in the United States, and that is shameful, because that was not happening 30 years ago. That is shameful. And I have some experience working in law school. I worked in prisons, and I did some work in the correction system, and I saw the effect of criminalizing what I quite frankly think of as really minor offenses. People were in prison for having small amounts of marijuana. I think that is and their lives are ruined. Their lives are ruined. They go to prison, and then afterwards we throw the book at them. It's unacceptable. So what I want to do is actually a little bit different from what Colin said. I think we need to move to a mentality of rehabilitation. We need to move away from throwing the book at people. That does not work. Throwing the book at people does not work. end of the day, this is an illness. People don't throw the book at me because I've got asthma. They give me medicine.
Rich?
So as a prosecutor, I saw this impact not only the lives of the people I was working with, the victims, the defendants, but also on our community. And what really is happening, well, I don't know if you know this, 80% of the cases that are coming through our court system are usually people who are stoned or drunk. And our jails, they are not the place for people who have this disease, because what's happening is people are self-medicating for a mental health issue or for a pain issue that's going untreated. And this gets back to the single payer issue that I raised earlier. We have people who can't get the health care they need. They can't get it for either a physical illness, and they can't get it for a mental illness because we don't have mental health parity. And when that happens, people self-medicate to help the pain. And as we all know, we make dumb decisions when we're stoned, right? And then they end up in the criminal justice system. So this is not the way we should be going. If we put more investment upstream so that we can prevent people and help people get the services they need, we will prevent people right away from using. Secondly, when we have people in the system who are actually using, we need to revisit our criminal justice code, because it's being enforced inequitably, especially upon our minority populations. This 3 strikes and you're outlaw has to go. And instead of doing enforcement proceedings that we have been doing, we need to change the whole dynamic and push people into treatment, not just for addiction, but also for the mental health issues that we're seeing that are rabid throughout our criminal justice system. If we can do that, we can actually make real change in people's lives, and it'll be cheaper for us in the long run, too.
Our next question, we start with Bob. What will you do? What will you all do to protect immigrant rights? Dreamers, DACA, workers, undocumented, keeping families together. How do you feel about border walls? Some little questions in there, but take it.
I'm absolutely against this border wall. It won't solve the problem. They will find another way to get in there. It's a waste of money, plain and simple. Now, for those that are already here, by law, anybody born in this country is a citizen. To me, it's anathema to say that now we're going to deport their parents because they got here illegally. We will break up the families. What kind of family value is that? These people have been here, they've been working, they've been paying taxes, they've been obeying the law. They've been good citizens. We have to come up with a way to let them stay here. Plain and simple. Now, I have ideas of what we could do to protect our wall, our border, pardon me. Stop the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq and put the troops on our border. Why not do that? Makes sense, doesn't it? They're spending money here, not over there. This is a ridiculous issue. It's all based on prejudice. Prejudice against the people coming in. We're a country of immigrants. My parents both were raised in predominantly Danish communities, learned Danish in school, and my great-grandfather came from Denmark. And there have been all kinds of immigrant transferences, all kinds of ways. People from Ireland when the crops were failing, people from Italy. This should not be a real issue. And putting up a border wall will make me think we're looking just like Russia when they put up the wall in Berlin. What a travesty.
Let's pass some laws that bring people out of the shadows and increase our potential, grow the economy. I'd love to put some improvements in our egg visa program, for one. I think that would bring, I think they said gross domestic product could go up by $2 billion if we did just that. 70% of the people that work in the agricultural industry are illegal immigrants. Let's just do that. Well, that's easy to say. And it's easy to say you're going to lead on an issue like this. It's easy to say you're going to lead. I was up at the Capitol when we were talking about driver's license for all. And yes, it makes sense. It makes sense. As an insurance agent, it's just safer. I mean, come on, you guys. Let's talk about these issues from a common sense perspective. But it is hard. It's about making relationships. If you want legislation passed, you can't just say, oh, I'm going to lead and I'm going to make sure. That's not how it works. You have to develop relationships. You have to work with people, understand where they're at, figure out the fears, bring everybody in a room. When I ran, I was endorsed by the Minnesota State Chamber, by the AFL-CIO, by AFSCME, by the firefighters, the only one I didn't get was the gun lobby. And it was because I worked so hard with everybody to try to figure out how we make this happen. And this is an issue that people are not moving on. They're not budging on it. So this might have to be an issue where we have to dig into and stand up for what we want. This just makes common sense to make these kinds of changes. And I will work as hard as I can to build those relationships that you have to do, whether you're out in Congress or you're here in the district, to figure out how we make this happen.
The story of immigration is one that always gets me excited because I think about my time in the Army, and I think about Alan, who wasn't an American citizen. He was from Ireland. I think about Ron, who wasn't an American citizen. He's from Haiti. They had an American flag on their shoulder, and they fought alongside with me because they fought for their country. That was the United States, in spite of not having citizenship. The immigrant story is the story of Minnesota. Everyone in here, in this room here, your ancestors came to Minnesota as immigrants originally. I think about my great-grandparents who immigrated to Plainview from Ireland. I think about one generation before that, and the Butlers and Sullivans who immigrated to Waseca. Minnesota is the story of immigration. And more than anything, I think about our dreamers. Not some dreamers somewhere else, but dreamers right here in Rochester. Dreamers I had the honor to meet with right over at Cafe Steam, who are American in every sense of the word but paper, who have aspirations, who have dreams, who want to be artists, small business owners, who want to be lawyers. They want to be part of our future. And I talk to small business owners all across this district, and they're worried. I talk to dairy farmers in Fillmore County who can't milk their cows because there aren't enough people. I talk to clinic after clinic who doesn't have enough healthcare providers. Immigration isn't just the right thing to do, isn't just the American story, it is our future. And GOP politics on this is not going to be where that future goes. We will be embracing our neighbors, not just because it is the right thing to do, but because it is our economic future. And it is the story of Minnesota at the end of the day. Thank you.
Thanks. Immigration, for me, I think that immigration is what has made our country what it is. It's the lifeblood of this country. It's why our economy is growing. It's why it brings vitality to our communities. It makes our culture interesting. Everything is this, the idea of the United States being a melting pot. This is about immigration. This is a country that's founded on immigration. So that's how I feel about immigration. It is as American as anything. It is quintessentially American. When people think of America, when they think of the United States, they think of a country of immigrants. So that's how I think about this. Now, as dreamers, as far as dreamers, I think about a young man that I met, and I'll just relay his story. He came to this country when he was 5 years old. His first memory in this country is of seeing the snow when he got to Minnesota. That's his first memory. And I talked to him, and he's started a business. He's led his life. He's 29 years old. But because he doesn't have documentation, he never started a family. He has not started a family. He's found somebody he loves, but he won't start a family because he doesn't know what's gonna happen to him. We're destroying people. And he is as American as me, as anybody in this room. So that's how I feel about Dreamers. We need to make sure that they are recognized. We need to do that.
So this country, as you all know, was founded on immigrants. And did you know that for a vast majority of our history, we never had an immigration policy? Did you know that? Our immigration policy was you landed on our shores and you became a U.S. citizen, right? And it's recently, recently is when we started to create immigration policies. And it was to keep the Chinese out. That was the first one. That tells you a little bit about our immigration policies. The current administration is using our immigration policy in a way that I find untenable, because they are attacking people, not because they're attacking people because they're being prejudiced, right? They're attacking people because of their faith. They're saying you can't come in here because you're Muslim. This is wrong. We know this. We need to stand up against it. When it comes to the Dreamers, the actions of this administration, we know are wrong too. The Dreamers are an integral fabric of our community, right here, today. Dreamers go to school with our children. They have children who go to school with our children. They're our neighbors. How do we tell a child that we are sending their parent to Mexico? How do we do that? How do we tear apart a parent from an American citizen? What does that say about our values? We know this is wrong. When the president came out with those actions to say the Dreamers can no longer sign up and continue on with DACA, other lawyers in this community, including myself, worked to fight to make sure the paperwork could get done. We did what we could to help the Dreamers, and I will continue to fight to ensure that the Dreamers have a pathway to citizenship, because that's the right thing to do. Also, we need to make sure that other people who come to our country can also have an easy pathway to citizenship. That's who we are. And if we lose those values, we lose who we are as a nation.
Thank you. I think there's a definite consensus here that we all want to work for the Dreamers. We all want to have a solution that works for DACA. I just couldn't imagine telling my nephews that we're shipping your mom home. She's from the Philippines. I couldn't imagine telling Carolina, who worked for me, who was from Guatemala, that worked in my restaurant, that worked hard in my restaurant, and now is a nurse, and has proven herself as she's grown in this. I couldn't imagine telling her that you have to leave. We have built this country on immigrants. That's no secret. Minnesota, I always remember as a kid, we were always called the melting pot. As people came from all over, the Serbs and the Croats and the Germans and the Irish, they're all here in Minnesota. And now that travel has become easier, we're bringing in new groups of people. We have a great Hmong community, a Somali community, and they're all contributing to the economy of Minnesota, and we are not going to send these people home. I don't care what the president says. There's too many of us that are going to stand up and tell him that this is not what we want as a country. We want to protect these people, welcome these people. They are our brothers and sisters.
Thanks. So we've got a few more minutes, and I'm going to propose changing the rules the next couple questions, just to be able to get more questions in. So Gail, if we can give just 1 minute answers for the next few questions, we may be able to get 2 or 3 more in. So, and this one goes to Vicki first. What is your position on improving access to health care? Do you support government-provided single-payer health care with no insurance companies between patients and their doctors? If so, how would you manage the transition? In 1 minute.
Okay, I'll talk really fast. I'm an insurance agent and I've been helping people find and have access to health care. In the state legislature, I made a proposal to put our public plan, Minnesota Care, out onto our exchange. So I am in favor of making that work. For me, it's going to take some steps. Reduce that age for Medicare, put those people in there and change that pool and help that pool. Let's do that first. It's easy, just change the age, right? Okay, then let's put a public plan out there. Let's start there, because I think we need to do this in steps, because we can get some things in place and know how it will work with providers, because if it doesn't work with providers in the rural healthcare systems that are out there, that's not going to be good either. If we can get some health insurance but don't have access to a doctor or a hospital or a clinic, we have to make that work. We can do this, but let's do it in steps and figure out how we can make that work.
Healthcare is the most...
Can I make one suggestion also? If you want to hear more answers, we all love all of these candidates. Let's cut the applause and we'll have an opportunity to applaud at the end. Go, Dan.
I've heard about healthcare more than any other issue on the campaign trail, because our health is our future. I think about women like Kathy out in Worthington, who had to convince specialists to see her mom after she had a heart attack. I think about farmers like Steve, who are paying $2,400 a month in premiums. And I think about the city of Albert Lea, who is wondering, what is our access to healthcare when minutes matter? My wife's second labor was 45 minutes. Minutes matter in healthcare. Solving this in Congress starts with the principle of where we stand. I am for universal health care. And if that is our principle, there are many different ways that we can get there. And then many different ways we can help Steve, we can help Kathy, we can help the city of Albert Lea to make sure health care is affordable, accessible, and of great quality. And that starts with lowering the age of Medicare, a public option. I'm open to anything that will get us there. But that principle has to guide us until every single person in this country is covered with affordable, quality care.
Fast. So I start with the principle that healthcare is a right. That's where I start. And I come from a family of healthcare providers. I have heard my dad, who works in an emergency room, talk about people who die because they have a tooth infection, because they have a tooth abscess, and they didn't have dental insurance. That is unacceptable. In a country that has a $19.5 trillion economy, people die because they have they didn't get a root canal. That's unacceptable. Here's what my proposal is to allow everybody to buy into the Medicare program. I think that's straightforward. It goes through your payroll tax. It is straightforward. We've done it, we do it for end-stage renal disease, and we can do it straight up to allow everybody to be able to have access. If you still have health insurance through your employer, you still have health insurance through your labor union, if you still have health insurance because you got a good bid on the open market, fine, you can keep that. But everybody should have access through the Medicare system, and that's my proposal.
This issue, as I mentioned earlier, is the #1 issue facing us, which is why I have pushed hard everywhere I've gone and talked about single payer. We have to move to a single payer system, and we got to get totally off the market and do something totally different. Other countries do this. They do it at half the cost of what we're paying for healthcare now, and they have better outcomes. So we know we can do this. And the way we do it is Bernie Sanders came up with a pretty good plan on it, right? You just take Medicare and you expand it to all. But you know what? We need to make sure we're making sure we have good reimbursement rates so that our hospitals and institutions can survive. We have to make sure that also those reimbursement rates ensure that clinics in our rural communities, like in Albert Lea, they can also survive, because our rural communities are losing clinics too fast. So we have to make sure that that's not happening. The other issue is we got to expand the coverage. We need to make sure that we have dental coverage, that we have mental health parity, and that we get eye care, right? I mean, these are basic health issues that we can take care of. Thank you.
I'm an example of what good insurance can do for you. I used to be kind of a big guy, about 375. But after I had triple bypass surgery over here at Mayo, I'm doing great. What a new lease on life. And if I hadn't had excellent insurance to take care of me, I would have been totally wiped out. We wouldn't have had a house, we wouldn't have had a business, we wouldn't have had anything. We have to protect our families, we have to protect our future. We have to move to some sort of a single payer system. I think Joe kind of hit it there. when we all have to be allowed to buy in. We're not all looking for this for free. Obviously, there's a cost to it as a country and as individuals, but yes, we do have to get there. When you go to one hospital and they want to charge you $400 for an x-ray and the other hospital wants to charge you only $100, there's no clarity there. There's no transparency of what costs are. The medical field is moving from service to value-based. That'll be another issue we'll talk about.
Bob?
It's really simple. People get a Social Security card, don't they? Even at birth. That is your national health ticket. And it's administered through Social Security / Medicare. It's that simple. What's not so simple is figuring out how we pay for it. And when we work, we pay taxes into the OASI, Old Age Security Income. And our employer pays taxes in there. That's how we pay for it. We're the only industrialized nation in the world that doesn't have national health care. It's very simple to do it if we have the will and if we'll devote the dollars. That's it. That's how we do it. And then everybody, no matter where they are, out in Worthington, over in Winona, and anywhere in between, they can go to a hospital. And no matter what age, if they're kindergarten or they're 75, they can go.
Thanks, Bob. This is working great. This will be our 7th question and probably our last question. And it goes to Dan. In the news and politics, we hear a lot about student debt and education prices. How would you go about reducing the prices of higher education and/or push for free college for students?
Yeah, it's a great question. As someone who has a ton of debt and carries that with them every day, as I imagine a lot of people in this room do, this is a critical issue. My parents went to Winona State, and they were able to work their way through school without a single debt, without a single loan to carry on after the fact. You talk to students at Winona State today, they'll laugh in your face at that proposition. That is unacceptable. And it's unacceptable when the idea of your student loan rates are higher than the rate of your car loan, the rate of your mortgage, the rate of your credit card payments.
Yes.
When we talk about people trying to be empowered to do what they want to do here and the freedom they have which to do it, they absolutely have to know that they're going to enter a field not knowing that they'll be able to pay for what they're doing. And that starts with capping student loan rates. That means forgiving student loans for people in a whole bunch of new occupations that it has to expand to, including new fields of public service. And at the end of the day, like I did in the Pentagon, we'll get to the bottom of what for-profit schools are doing to our education system and making sure we are fighting them tooth and nail. Thank you.
So this is a critical issue for our district, and I am reminded of in Fairmont, there's a kid I was talking to, and every community I go to, people always talk to me about how our communities are being hollowed out because kids cannot move home. They cannot move back to their hometown because they've got $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 in debt. So what we need to do, there are a couple things that we need to do. One, we need to expand Pell Grants. We need to make sure that the resources are going into it. We need to put more resources into institutions. We need to put so that institutions can shift the balance back to the federal and state government away from tuition. We need to allow people to restructure their loans so that they're at a lower rate, a lower interest rate, and loan forgiveness. Things like loan forgiveness if you go into a public service job. Those programs are absolutely critical. If we can do that, then kids can move back. They can move home because a lot of them want to move home. And that's what we need to do.
Rich.
Right now, we have a lose-lose situation because we have employers looking for an educated, skilled workforce. We have young adults who want to get the education and skills to succeed. They can't afford it. And so employers can't find the employees, and because they have no one but the skills or education they're looking for. We need to change this dynamic and make it a win-win. And the way we do that is we make the investments in our best resource, us. And we start with early childhood education. Every dollar we invest there, we save 8. That's a smart investment, getting 800% return. I like that. When we get to the collegiate level, We should be investing so that every young adult who wants to go to a public university and college can do that without having to pay tuition. And that pays for itself, because when people have a college education, they make more money and their income tax is higher, so it offsets our investment. But that also has to be true for the trades. We are short trades. We need carpenters, electricians, pipe fitters. We need to make sure they can also get that skill set without having to pay for it. Thanks.
Colin.
A couple of weeks ago, I was talking to a college student, and the discussion came around to student debt and how much debt he had. Because I had mentioned my nephew left with $250,000 in debt from college, but he also has an MD behind his name. And as this other kid said, he says, you know what, I don't really mind my debt. Yeah, I've got a lot. I just want that job. I want that opportunity. I don't necessarily want to have my loan paid off. I accepted the loan. I accepted the interest rate. I knew what it was. But the job just wasn't there that was promised me when I was in school. I mean, we have to focus on this and understand our jobs that we're paying, because somebody is paying that bill. Whether it's a bank or the government, you know, you can't forgive everything, but we have to create opportunities. We have to give these kids opportunities to succeed. And that's something that we haven't, we talk about forgiveness, but you forgive it, they still don't have the job.
I would not be for giving tuition free to every student who wants to go to college. Keep in mind, I taught at a university. I saw students come who didn't belong there. They came because mommy and daddy would pay their way. I would look at a program that would pay some of their college after they graduate. You don't want people there who don't want to be there. I would do the same thing for technical colleges, but some, I think they should have to pay part of their way. I don't believe they should have a free ride. And yes, there are a number of companies that will give college tuition reimbursement. And I would be in favor of, again, after people complete it, not just paying it the minute they go in. Get serious students, get people who are committed, get people who complete their education, then pay back, say, half.
Vicki.
I was a non-traditional student. After I graduated from Appleton High School, I went to Citibank and qualified for their tuition reimbursement program. It allowed me to take classes at college while I worked, and I was able to move up to where I became an efficiency analyst in a department called operational control. If that's not a reason to send me to Congress, I don't know what else would. So my plan for this, I've thought about this really hard because I know people need and students need opportunities to do it, is let's give loan forgiveness, but not only payback rates based on how much you make, but where you go to work. I think this is an idea we should think about because I worked really hard on rural economic development issues. I passed bills in the Senate for shortage areas, for teachers, for doctors, for dentists, for critical access, all kinds of loan forgiveness in shortage areas. I think we should open it up for all areas, including business. If you want to get a degree and start a business in a rural area, let's provide that loan forgiveness and get economic development at the same time.
Well, we've come to our closing statements, and if your question wasn't asked or you have thought of additional questions, I remind you that over the next 2.5 months you have an opportunity to get up close with these candidates and ask your questions. They all have campaign information in the back, and if we get out early enough and the library doesn't close, you may be able to catch them on the way out. So we are going to start with our closing statements from, and we're going to start with Joe. And
how many minutes?
What's that?
How many minutes?
1 minute.
1 minute. All right, thank you, everybody. And I want to close with why I'm a Democrat. And I'll tell you why I'm a Democrat. There are two people, FDR and my grandpa. And My grandpa he had a 6th grade education. He worked on the family farm until they lost it in the Great Depression. And then he found work as a carpenter. And my grandpa would always say to me that the reason that he had a good life, that he could send my mom and my uncles to school, the reason that he had a safe work environment and that he had a pension and he had good wages is because of his union and because of FDR and Social Security that was there for when he retired. And my grandpa gave credit to the Democrats and FDR for those things. He gave credit to them for his strong union because of the New Deal that passed labor laws, and he gave credit to FDR for Social Security. And when a testament to this, when he died, there were 3 things in his coffin. There was a crucifix, there was a picture of our family, and there was his union lapel pin. And he gave credit to the Democrats and FDR for 2 of the 3. And that's why I'm a Democrat, and we need to get back to doing that because we make people's lives better.
Thanks again to all of you for the great questions. And we didn't get to all the topics that I'm sure you wanted to talk about, like climate change. Right? And we didn't even get a solid question on what are we going to do about campaign finance and get the big money out, because what's happening is we have big money in, and what happens with the tax bill. So there are significant changes that I look forward to talking with you about. And you can go to the website, richwright.org, to learn where I stand on other issues, but you know I'm for single payer. I'm for $15 an hour minimum wage now. I believe all of our young adults need to make sure that we're making the investment so they can get college education. I believe everyone should be able to get the trade skills that they need. These are smart investments. They're not costs, they're investments, because we become stronger when we make these investments. It helps us. Other nations do this, and they do it well. We can too. Over the year, our community has stood together at rallies, and I'm asking for you to stand with me and for your support. My name is Rich Wright. I look forward to working with you to be your congressperson. Thanks.
Thank you for the opportunity to let me come back to Rochester. I didn't mention that I did used to run the Godfathers here in town years ago. So the pizza was good at one time anyway. But now I'm still in the food and booze business with my place here in Alden. But what this election's going to come down to is, what do you folks really want? You know, think about, what do I want in that congressperson that I'm going to send out to Washington? Is that person going to even know where I come from? What if I call up that congressman or congresswoman and ask them a question? Will they be available? Will they know where I'm from? Will they understand what's going on in southern Minnesota? Or will they be disjointed and not part of this? So as you look at these people and you talk to these people and you know where it comes from. And I'll tell you where it comes from me. It comes from right here. Because I definitely care about this district, and I want you to represent you in Washington. Thank you.
Who best can you send to Washington? Who do you want to hire? You see a lot of common values here. Now think about this. Who from here can best represent you in Washington? I'm a commissioned naval officer formerly, a college professor. I have a master's degree. I've lived in a foreign country. I am well prepared to deal with all of the issues. I will have credibility with the other representatives. Keep in mind, there are 434 others. So you need to think about that. And I think if you look closely at who I am, what I stand for, and then think about how I can represent you, I'm your man.
You don't wake up one day and say, hey, you know what, I think I'm going to run for Congress. This is something that is a very serious decision, not just for us and for me, but for you. And making that decision on who you do want to go and represent you. I can remember in 10th grade, my girlfriends and I really wanted a boys baseball team. We fought really hard. They said, no, So some of us in protest tried out for the boys baseball team. I made the team. This is the first time I remember actively participating. We did end up with our team, but the school board voted the girls cannot play boys baseball because there were no girls' locker rooms on the field. And the coach came and told me that, and I said, I had a choice to make. What do I do? Do I continue or do I quit? Well, I decided to work with the public and to work with the school board, and we did get our team. But I learned that you have to be active and involved if you want to make change. You guys know that. You're here. You're here trying to understand who it is that has the passion and the heart to represent you. And we also know that it might not look the way that it will take, and that we can't give up, and I'm not going to give up. Check out my website. Come and talk to me. I'd love to hear from you, because that's what it is, hearing from you.
Thanks once again to our hosts, and thanks to all of you for being here and participating. 4 generations ago, my great-grandparents immigrated here from Ireland as a church janitor and an assistant to a priest. And just 20 miles from here, they got started on making their lives here and making their lives better. And ever since then, the Feeans have worked for the values that we hold so dear. And today, those values, hard work, service to a community, the belief that we're all in this together, are at risk. The GOP is already targeting this district. And we will build the grassroots organization just like Tim Walz did to keep this seat blue in November. We've traveled 30,000 miles, we've spent 1,000 hours on the phone, and we have secured pledge delegates in all 21 counties across this district. Americans are desperately seeking a new brand of leadership that will put people above politics, that will address our challenges head on. That's what I learned to do here growing up. That's what we did as soldiers in Iraq, as teachers, and as civil servants, and that is what I will do as your next congressperson. If this sounds like a movement you want to be a part of, then join us and caucus with us on February 6th. Thank
you. We have wonderful candidates. Can we give them one last? Tuesday, February 6th. Check out, if you don't know your sites, check out the DFL.org, campaign lit in the back. Candidates will be here if you want to catch them. Thank you all for being here. Thank you to our volunteers, and have a safe drive home.
Nice job.